Let me ask you a question before we begin. What if I told you that the Eiffel Tower was never meant to last, was widely hated by artists and intellectuals, and almost disappeared entirely, yet somehow became the most recognizable structure on the planet? This isn't just a story of a tower. It's the story of how humanity creates meaning, how rejection can turn into reverence, and how a single structure reshaped not only Paris, but the way the world understands progress, beauty, and ambition. If you've ever seen the Eiffel Tower in photos, movies, or your own memories, stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't hear the words Eiffel Tower the same way again. To understand the Eiffel Tower, you must first understand the fear that gave birth to it. In the late 19th century, Paris was a cultural capital of the world. It was a center of art, philosophy, fashion, and intellectual power. But it was also a city deeply anxious about the future. The Industrial Revolution was transforming everything. Factories were rising, machines were replacing hands, and iron was replacing stone. Many feared that technology would destroy beauty itself. When France announced the 1889 World's Fair, meant to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution, the nation needed a monument that would announce its technological supremacy to the world. The plan was radical: a 300-meter iron tower, taller than anything ever built by humans. At the time, this was unthinkable. Iron was not considered beautiful. It was associated with factories, railways, and labor, not art. Paris was a city of stone, symmetry, and classical proportions. A massive iron structure rising above it all felt like an invasion. As soon as the design was revealed, outrage erupted. Some of the most famous artists, writers, and architects in France signed a public letter condemning the project. They called it monstrous, useless, and humiliating. They said it would cast a shadow over Paris like a black factory chimney. They believed it would permanently scar the skyline of one of the most beautiful cities in the world. What's fascinating is that they weren't reacting to what the tower was, but to what it represented. The Eiffel Tower symbolized a future where machines mattered more than tradition, where engineering challenged art, where function challenged form. And for many, that future felt terrifying. Gustave Eiffel, the engineer behind the tower, understood this fear, but he also understood something deeper. He believed that beauty could evolve. Eiffel was not trying to compete with cathedrals or palaces. He was creating something entirely new. His tower was not built to imitate nature or history. It was built to express human logic, mathematics, and structural honesty. Every curve of the tower exists because of physics. Every angle responds to wind resistance. Nothing is decorative. Nothing is hidden. The structure reveals itself completely. In a world used to disguising engineering behind stone facades, this was revolutionary. When construction began, Parisians watched with skepticism. As the tower rose higher and higher, critics expected disaster. They predicted collapse. They predicted embarrassment. They predicted regret. Instead, the tower stood. Not only did it stand, but it dominated the skyline in a way no building ever had before. It forced people to look upward in a city accustomed to horizontal beauty. And then something unexpected happened. When the World's Fair opened, millions of visitors arrived from across the globe. They didn't just tolerate the tower. They were drawn to it. They climbed it. They talked about it. They marveled at it. For the first time, a structure was not admired because it resembled the past, but because it pointed boldly toward the future. The Eiffel Tower had become something new, a symbol of human possibility. Yet even after its success, the tower's fate was uncertain. It was never meant to be permanent. The agreement allowed it to stand for just 20 years. After that, it was supposed to be dismantled. What saved it wasn't romance or beauty. It was usefulness. As technology advanced, the Eiffel Tower proved to be an ideal platform for scientific experiments. It became essential for radio transmissions, weather observations, and later, military communications. The very critics who once called it useless were now dependent on it. This transformation, from eyesore to necessity, is one of the most powerful lessons the Eiffel Tower teaches us. Sometimes, what society rejects first becomes what it cannot live without later. Over time, the tower embedded itself into the emotional identity of Paris. Writers who once despised it began using it as a symbol of longing and modernity. Artists who once mocked it began painting it. Lovers began meeting beneath it. Protesters gathered near it. Fireworks lit it. Wars used it. Peace celebrated it. The Eiffel Tower became a silent witness to history. During World War II, when Paris was occupied, French resistance fighters famously cut the elevator cables so that occupying forces would have to climb the stairs. The tower, without firing a single weapon, became an act of defiance. When Paris was liberated, the tower stood untouched, still rising above the city, like a promise that identity can survive occupation. What's remarkable is that the Eiffel Tower doesn't represent just one idea. To engineers, it represents precision and innovation. To artists, it represents contradiction and transformation. To travelers, it represents arrival. To couples, it represents love. To France, it represents resilience. Very few structures in human history have held so many meanings simultaneously. And here's the deeper truth most guides never tell you. The Eiffel Tower didn't become iconic because it was perfect. It became iconic because it was controversial. If everyone had loved it immediately, it would have blended into history like countless monuments before it. But because it challenged expectations, because it provoked emotion, because it forced debate, it stayed alive in public consciousness. The tower teaches us that cultural immortality often begins with discomfort. Today, millions of people visit the Eiffel Tower each year. They take photos, they admire the view, but what they're really connecting with is a story, one that mirrors human progress itself. We fear change. We resist the unfamiliar. We criticize what breaks tradition. And then, slowly we integrate it. We assign meaning. We build memories around it. The Eiffel Tower is proof that transformation doesn't happen quietly. It happens visibly, boldly, and often against resistance. So the next time you hear the words Eiffel Tower, don't just think of Paris. Think of a world standing at the edge of the unknown. Think of artists arguing against engineers. Think of iron rising where stone once ruled. Think of an idea that refused to disappear. Because the Eiffel Tower is not just a monument. It is a reminder that the future often arrives we're in the face of something we don't yet understand. And that one day, we may call it beautiful. If this story changed the way you see one of the world's most famous structures, stay curious. There are many more symbols around us hiding histories just as powerful. And sometimes, the greatest stories are standing right in front of us, quietly holding up the sky.